Hello BookTube, welcome back to my channel. I know twice in one day, it's quite a lot, but I was tagged to do the book addiction tag by Lady Jane Books, so I will link her video in the description box. I'm going to assume if you're at my channel that you've already discovered hers, but on the off chance that you haven't, you definitely need to check her channel out because she's amazing. Let's get into these questions. So question number one is, what is the longest amount of time you can comfortably go without picking up a book? I would say a few weeks, and that's not unusual if you've read a very intense book or a bad book. Sometimes you just need to hit the reset button, and that's quite all right. And everyone has their own reading ebbs and flows, and it just depends on your mood sometimes. Number two, how many books do you carry on your person, physical or device, at any one time? Funny story, last night I was actually giving a friend of mine a ride, and she opened the door to my car and she's like, only a librarian has like random books just strewn about in the seats of her car. Because I had like 5 or 6 random books that of course are on my ever-growing TBR. Obviously, I tote around books in my purse, in my car, but as far as books that I'm actually reading, I would say I keep 2 books on my Libby app that are audiobooks, and then I usually carry 1 physical book with me. Number 3. Do you keep every book you buy or receive, or are you happy to pass them on to make space for more? I definitely like to pass books along to friends, especially if it's a book that is a fiction paperback. You know, if I enjoyed it, I want other people to read it. I like to discuss books, and it's hard to discuss books if no one you know has read that book. And so I do like to share books, especially if it's not a book I'm going to reread. The only books I like to keep at this point are books that I haven't read yet, or books that are nonfiction and that I know I'm going to keep for my collection. And so if it's not something I'm going to keep, I definitely like to get it out of the house and pass it along. Number 4. How long would you spend in a bookshop on a standard visit? At least an hour. Probably a couple of hours if I'm by myself, because it's really hard to leave. You're looking at all of the books, all of the stories that you're missing out on. You have to leave so many of the books behind, so many of the stories that you'll never get to read. And so it's a struggle. It's a struggle because you want to buy all the books. You want to read all the books. And that's one of the struggles with BookTube, because I watch all of these really awesome videos and I write down all of these books that sound amazing and that I really want to read. And I just know in my head that there's no way I'm going to read all of these books. But the fun is in discovering new books and trying to decide which ones I'm going to read. It's a fun process, but you just know that you can't read them all, you can't buy them all, but it sure is fun to look. Number 5, how much time per day do you actually spend reading? Well, of course, this depends on what I have going on that day, and most days I have to work, so that definitely interferes with reading time. But for a time, we did not have any TV other than local channels, and even though we have TV now, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I still read mostly for entertainment. So I probably read 2 or more hours a day, just depending on what I have going on that day. But the other day we had a little mini ice storm, and so I didn't have to go to work, and I actually stayed in all day and read, and I probably read 250 or more pages of the book I'm currently reading, and it was awesome. My muscles probably atrophied a little bit, so I don't know how good it is for me physically, but it was great. Totally worth it. Number 6, where does the task picking up a book appear on your daily to-do list? I don't put it on a to-do list. I'm definitely a planner, and I do write down things that I need to do in a day, but reading is not one of those things that I consider part of the to-do list. Reading is my hobby. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing, and so it's just one of the things that I do, and I typically do it at night after dinner when I'm drinking my coffee in the morning. Sometimes I'll read. Number 7, how many books do you reckon you own in total, including ebooks? I have a little over 300 books right now. Number 8, approximately how often do you bring up books in conversation? There's 2 main topics of conversation with me, John F. Kennedy and books. And my friends are really awesome because they humor me, and sometimes they egg me on with the John F. Kennedy stuff, and they like to get me going. They like to tease me. They tell me that I look like Carrie Mathison from Homeland with her crazy conspiracy boards and her color coordinated sticky notes and that sort of thing, which is fine. I'm okay with that. Big Homeland fan. She's brilliant. And with reading, I have a lot of friends who are readers, so we talk books, but sometimes it's a problem when you haven't read the same book. So sometimes you find yourself recounting the entire plot of a book and essentially spoiling a book for someone, which you don't want to do. And so that's one of the reasons that I came to BookTube, was to seek out people who had read some of the same books so that you could talk books without actually spoiling the plot. Number 9, what is the biggest book page count you have finished reading? I thought this was going to be The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, but I actually think it's Voyager by Diana Gabaldon, which is 870 pages. This is the 3rd book in the Outlander series, and it's actually the last book that I read in the Outlander series. And I'm sorry, Judy. My friend Judy is a huge, and I mean rabid, Outlander fan, but I abandoned the series after the 3rd book. It was good, I enjoyed it, but I just didn't see the need to continue it. For me, it felt like some plot lines were being recycled. The characters were starting to get a little bit older for me, and I just wasn't as in love with the characters as she was. So, to each his own, just wasn't as in love with it. Number 10, is there a book you had to get your hands on against all odds? Well, no, I've never done anything crazy to get my hands on a book, and if I did, I certainly wouldn't admit it on BookTube. Number 11, is there a book you struggled to finish because you refused to DNF? Well, there were lots of books that I struggled to finish because for a long time I refused to DNF any books. I just felt like if you started a book, then you had to finish it. It was just part of my personality, and finally just you grow up and you realize that you have a finite amount of time, and if the book isn't providing some form of edification or entertainment, then why are you reading it? Put the book down, for crying out loud, people. I see you booktubers out there struggling through those books. Don't do it. Put it down right now. If you are struggling through a book, if you're at least halfway through and it's just not happening for you, put it down. Let me be that friend to tell you it's okay to DNF a book. It is quite all right. The world won't end. You gave the book a fair shot. 50% is plenty enough. That's enough of your time that's been given to that book. So I'm finally to the point where I feel like I can DNF books, and I feel so much better for it. Number 12, what are 3 of your main book goals for 2021? Well, I do want to read 21 more books on the top 100 books of all time poster that I have. It's a scratch-off poster. that one of my friends gave me for Christmas, and most of the books on there are classics, so I thought that would be a really neat way to incorporate classics into my 2021 TBR. And I also just have the general goal to kind of broaden my horizons as far as my reading goes and read in some different genres that I typically don't pick up. I mean, I don't read a ton of sci-fi or fantasy, and so I'm hoping to pick up some titles in those areas, and also to try to read in some different areas of history that I don't necessarily gravitate towards. And then the third goal for 2021 actually involves a booktuber. So Noah over at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse put out a video a little while ago. I will link it in my description box, but it's called 8 Short Powerful Works I Love. And in that video, he talks about these 8 books. They're all very interesting and unique. The only one I'd actually read on the list was Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and the others I'd never heard of. And I was very intrigued by the video, but he kept saying in the video, "You're not ready for this. You're not ready for this." And every time he said that, it felt like a dare to me. I mean, it felt like in A Christmas Story when Flick is triple dog dared. So I feel like I want to incorporate some of those titles into my 2021 TBR. So I thought that would be kind of neat to do. Number 13, have you ever had the privilege of converting someone into a reader by inspiration or your incessant nagging? Well, by virtue of being a librarian, that's kind of part of my job, and periodically I do have some success with that. It is an ongoing struggle, and converting people to become readers is more difficult now than it ever was, just because there are so many different distractions and different diversions that we didn't have 50 years ago, 70 years ago. And so when I do convert someone into a reader, it does give me the warm and fuzzies. It does just give me the feels. It confirms why I do what I do. And it doesn't happen every day. But it happens often enough to keep you in the game, right? It keeps you going. It happens just often enough to keep you coming back for more. And I had a senior who I finally got to read a book. Hadn't read a book his entire high school career, and I put the right book in his hands before he graduated, and he finally read an entire book. And he told me he stayed up all night one night reading this book. So that was very, very rewarding for me. It is nice to know that when you do reader's advisory, that you put the right book in the right person's hands. And sometimes, you don't get it right, and sometimes you do. Number 14, describe what books mean to you in 5 words. Dreams, education, freedom, refuge, and connection. So now I'm going to tag a few people. I apologize if you've already been tagged, and if you don't want to do this tag, you are under no obligation to do so. The first person I'm going to tag is my buddy John at Hey Y'all Listen Up. The second person I'm going to tag is Book Zealots. The third person I'm going to tag is my nonfiction buddy Bill Rutenberg. The next person I'm going to tag is a channel I just found recently, Rosie Cockshoot. And the last person I'm going to tag is Noah at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse. So I hope everyone is having a great day, and I will see you in the next video.